In these clips, he resides next to the shaking one-eyed robot, but we'll get to him sometime soon. Very, very soon. Yep, let's do it. Happy Spooksember, everyone. That's how they say it, right? And welcome back to Rogue Robot Reviews, where today we'll be talking about a rather spooky character. Well, kinda. The highly bizarre, long-awaited, shaking one-eyed robot. Before we start, there's a couple addendums I need to address from the last episode. The first is that I actually found where our purple friend is in this shot, in the far distance near the ceiling, jumping in the air with excitement. And the other is his number, 4639, as confirmed by the Pixar Wiki, which I need to mention has received an ocean's worth of updates lately. Nearly all of those characters I listed last time are now back, along with lots of new characters and images, some of which have even been given the placeholder names that I came up with. That's incredible. I've now unintentionally become part of the Wall-E lore, and it seems to me that somebody working on the wiki is a big fan of mine. With this and what I'm about to mention next, we are, or at least I am, going through the golden age of rogue robot discoveries. I also need to bring up the introduction to combinatorics, a recent discovery for me. This was essentially a Khan Academy lesson that went over how to make many different robots using just a few parts. It gave me a good look into how these characters were created, and now I know where images like these originated from. It also introduced me to technical directors Lou Hamelage and Jacob Spears, the guys who designed the robots. Huge thank you to those two, because without them, this series would not be possible.
You have my respect. I hope they remember you.
So anyway, without further ado, this is the Shaking One-Eyed Robot. The Shaking One-Eyed Robot is one out of a bazillion utility robots built by Ennard, stationed on the Axiom, serving passengers wherever they're needed. As for what he does specifically, we'll get to that later, so instead, we'll start with his design. He's a sleek, white robot that can fly at any level he chooses, with a tall, boxy upper head with a very flat face, presenting a rather slender vision screen, displaying one circular, light blue eye, something we don't see much in this series.
I'm a black Scottish cyclops!
This is accompanied by a wider, curvier bottom portion that wraps around the back, along with a pair of light blue turquoise stripes going down the middle of his face and around his head, which is also a rare color for the robots. His arm structure is basically the same as other robots we've covered. Black extension piece situated under his head, a pair of white pieces branching out, dark gray hydraulics, elbow joints, a second extension leading to a pair of hinge joints, which connect to a gray plate that can slide along the forearm, albeit only the left arm. As you can probably tell by now, his arms are actually asymmetrical, with one sloping up and the other down. His left arm, which he often keeps tilted, has a black rectangle underneath, along with this turquoise holder piece with a black patch on top. His right arm, meanwhile, is adorned with a white pill bottle-shaped container, and this tiny black dispenser piece. I wonder what those could be used for. Now, One Eye here is actually part of a trio that all share these arm pieces, consisting of him, the small blue robot, and an orange FMAD look-alike, the same one that gets yeeted by 3671. You also might have noticed his lack of any defined fingers or claws, just these weird black nubs without much in the way of function.
Look, Mom! No hand!
Additionally, he has a rectangular patch on the center of his back, a gray number written on his lower right, which we currently can't identify unfortunately, and lastly, a green logo on both sides of his head. It's probably meant to be a drink or something, but it honestly looks like a pear to me. Okay, now it's time to address the Walla in the room. His unnerving appearance. I don't know if it's just me, but he looks kinda creepy, to the point where it's become a recurring joke on my channel, and I blame it on two things, his eye and his smile. In some faraway shots, it doesn't look like he even has any eyes, and there's a very rare variant of him with 2 eyes rather than 1, and it's like the most cursed looking thing I've ever seen.
He's ugly! 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 Ugly!
The other thing, though, is this crack, which ends up looking like a weird smile. This guy isn't the only one to have this quirk. It's something I like to call false mouth syndrome, which occurs when there's a line or something below the robot's eyes, giving the illusion of a mouth. Grabby, Hands, Cardus, and many others have it. Once you notice it, you can't unnotice it. But while it can be distracting, I'm sure it wasn't intentional from the animators. It's just too funny not to mention.
Hello!
Oh my god!
Now there is an additional split here on the lower jaw that kinda ruins the illusion, but it's hardly visible in some shots. In the end, this guy absolutely takes the cake for the most regular yet odd-looking robot, a certified resident of the uncanny valley, with an inhuman, expressionless gaze devoid of emotion.
You are horrifying to look at.
I swear he wants to reap your soul and sacrifice it to demons. Either that, or he's seen some stuff.
It's like if they remade WALL-E, but instead of being an ultra-cute dibby with huge binocular eyes, he looked like this. I don't want to hug this thing. I'm terrified of this.
Seriously, place them in a dark, enclosed space, and you have perfect horror game material. Okay, maybe I'm going a little too far. Obviously, I've never actually found this guy scary, just kind of derpy and uncomfortable, resembling a weird alien or something. Fitting for someone who's lived most of their life
in space!
And despite all my teasing, his design is quite neat. He might seem pretty standard fare at first, but the more you look into it, the more interesting it gets, with a lot of tangible, well thought out detail put into it. And even with his freakish exterior, he seems pretty harmless. But you know what they say, you cannot trust somebody who smiles all the time. By now, you're probably still wondering, what does this guy even do? Well, for a while, I didn't have a clue. I assumed he was yet another generic maintenance bot, transporting cargo or something, but that obviously didn't work out. Then later, I found this piece of concept art that portrayed him carrying a cup of coffee. This was exciting enough on its own, and it got me searching for answers, which led me to finding this. In the shot of Mo causing an accident, you can see him handling, what else? A porcelain coffee mug. This absolutely blew my mind, confirming this guy to be a floating coffee machine. And it makes sense since coffee is already a thing you can get on this ship. Just deliver that drink soon, bud. You don't want it to get cold or anything. As for his name, well, if you thought Small Purple Robot was a mouthful, then get a load of this guy. Now, the shaking in the name only applies to the repair word variant, so a more conventional name would be One-Eyed Coffee Robot or something. Other more silly names that I've referred to him as include Shaky or Creepy.
I said it again.
Said what?
My name.
What is your name?
Creepy.
I'm sure it is, but what is it?
Creepy! Creepy is his name. His name is Creepy.
But as a kid, the nickname I gave him was Knife, Fork, Spoon.
What?
Yeah, I still have no idea why. It's not like anything on his body resembles that of silverware. I suppose it was my way of separating him from the other robots? I don't know. As for his most notable appearances, a few can be seen right after Wally boards the ship. One is seen behind John when he falls over. Plenty, and I mean plenty of them, stop at the big intersection to point and stare at Wally and Eve, including Double Eye here in the background. A couple are seen during the climax, trying to avoid hands at the intersection, one of which is seen up close, letting the gang pass through. And we see many of them at the end, exploring their new home, which is a nice little goodbye to the character. And with all that said, let's move on to the rogue robot. He resides in the repair ward in Group 2B. Yeah, I've given the sections of the room code names. I'll talk about that another time. This is the second closest area to the entrance on the right side of the room. This dude sits with 3671 on his left, and the picking robot 4341, and 2 empty slots on his right, making him the first of the group to be covered. He has a red boot connected to the top and back of his head. His malfunction is this extreme vibrating motion, which seems to originate from his left arm. This glitch isn't anything exclusive to him, as several other robots suffer from it too. As for how he ended up so jittery, perhaps he was in an accident. Maybe he drank some of his coffee and turned hyperactive. Maybe someone needs to turn up the thermostat and get him a blanket and some hot cocoa, because it is freezing! Whatever the cause, we first see him in the opening shot, with his arms poking out underneath 3671. Much later, when Wally escapes, he turns right towards the camera to look at Wally. Here you can clearly see his violent convulsions and piercing glance. Off-screen, he would have watched Wally break into the diagnostics room, fire Eve's blaster, and shut down the walls. Once he realizes that he's been freed, mechanical mayhem ensues. He shudders his way out of there, looking to his left, and excitedly jumps around with the others. He turns around and lowers himself to look at Wally, surrounded by 4341, the long-necked robot, etc. And once again, his empty and disturbing stare can be seen from a mile away. But once everyone charges and grabs hold of Wally, he just sort of vanishes into the crowd as they head for the exit. He then appears very subtly escaping the repair ward on the left side of the entrance, behind Van Gogh and in front of 3671 and 3142. Now on the move, he, along with the rest of the horde, darts through the gangways, turning at the intersection behind Grabby and Helmet. Kinda getting hidden by the cluster of characters on screen, he shifts his way around, flailing his arms, and once everyone gets halted, you can see him peeking through behind Fix-It, which is something that took me a long time to notice. After this shot, similar to the last bot, he leaves this location and moves to another, this time hidden behind Brella, the blue grabber robot, and the small blue robot. You can see him when Eve arrives, and when his photo gets taken. He appears very briefly when Eve gets upset, and oddly enough, when everyone makes a run for it, he ends up right in the dead front of the group. At first, I thought he just popped into the frame, but upon closer inspection, he was already nestled behind Helmet right before, meaning he really just clipped through the crowd. After this, he leaps over the stewards, running behind other robots like the ringed robot, and turning to the right. After this, he's MIA, never to be seen again. I do suppose that after the Axiom had returned to Earth, he might have met up with Wally and the rest of the gang. We can only hope. It feels like they never really gave him a chance to fully shine. He was always regulated to just sitting around in the background, filling up another spot, further adding to the collection of rejects. But as we all know, the story never ends there. He appeared in the background of Bernie, sitting in the corner of the screen behind Supplier, and alongside Grabby and Lifter.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
He was also in the after credit scene. Now, this full body image of him that I've used throughout the video appeared in the Captaining the Axiom video, the BNL Bots video in a huge blur, and of course, the introduction to combinatorics, in both the corner of the mega chart and very briefly during a transition, as he sits next to 4639 and this guy. And in this image and this image alone, he has this small piece sticking out the bottom of his head here, which doesn't show up anywhere in the movie. Very weird. There's the aforementioned concept art, and other than some color differences, it seems that from the beginning, his appearance stayed relatively consistent. Unsurprisingly, he was in that pre-rendered shot, where we actually get to see more of him moving around behind Fix-It, and here he has a fully white color scheme. Last thing I want to mention is that DeviantArt user Wobbly has actually redrawn the character 3 times. Twice they gave him coffee-centric names, Latte and Decaf, which are actually pretty cool, though unofficial. And the other time, he was given the job of collecting and snipping tickets? Yeah, before I even knew what his real job was, I was pressing X to doubt. Because why would such a specific job get assigned to such a frequently seen character? But I respect the attempt. Maybe it's an OC, who knows. So that is the shaking one-eyed robot. A weirdo among weirdos. I honestly thought that this video was going to be shorter than this, but I stand corrected. There really is a lot worth discussing about him. From his unsettling design to the discovery of his purpose, he's a noteworthy and underrated addition to the series. Even with all the jokes I made earlier, I still think that this elderly sleep paralysis demon is deserving of our love. Once again, thank you all for watching, and I hope you all enjoy the spooky season while it lasts, because you never know what could be right behind you. See you all in the next one.